This house wouldn't collapse if you vanished tomorrow. My sister laughed as if it were the most normal thing in the world, and my father snarled at me that way one Sunday morning while the gravy was still warm. This story is for you if you've ever felt like an extra in your own life, ignored by your own family, or told you didn't matter. Every story in Family and Story speaks to those who have endured silent suffering. If this video speaks to you, kindly hit the like button. For more poignant, incredibly human stories, subscribe to Family and Story. I read all of them, so please leave a remark below. Let me now take you back to the day I made the decision that I could exist without their consent. I recall my father saying it while the ceiling fan buzzed overhead. Cheap wine and grilled potatoes filled the air. My mom didn't recoil. My younger sister Carissa laughed into her glass as if he had just told her a hilarious joke. I simply stood there. Keeping my face from breaking, I held a platter of deviled eggs. I was 28 years old, in a technical sense still living at home. Unnoticeable. My name is Lena Caldwell, and I come from a proud Southern family as the quiet middle child. The eldest Dean inherited the family's pride and the Caldwell farm supply business. The baby Carissa is full of charm and pearls, and she was given the kind of compliments that came from my father's mouth without end. And me, I'm a nurse who works nights. I give loving baths to dying strangers that I never received from my family. In the living room, however, I don't have a framed picture. My dad didn't yell. He didn't. Like a gavel that had already made up its mind, his voice was low. This house wouldn't collapse if you vanished tomorrow. The others simply continued to munch. The most painful aspect was that I didn't respond to him. I didn't. Like a waitress receiving orders, I simply nodded once before taking a seat at the very edge of the dining table. I kept my plate largely full. There was no place for my appetite in that space. Later that night, I wiped the table by myself while Carissa flashed her engagement ring, and my mother gushed about potential wedding locations. I recall thinking, perhaps if I disappeared, no one would even notice me, as I stood at the sink with the water dripping over my fingertips. However, something deep and silent inside of me resisted. It murmured, "Go on. Let them believe you don't exist," since I was hiding something. I wasn't merely working evenings to make ends meet. I studied when my shifts ended and the hospice's hallways were silent. Over several months, even years. I had been pursuing a license in palliative care, saving quietly, planning in silence. For my dream, Willow Haven. A location where those who are alone can feel watched, cherished, and secure. My relatives didn't know. When I wasn't holding the spoon, they never inquired about my activities. However, I recalled each patient who had grasped my hand as if it were a lifeline. All of the thank yous I'd gotten from random people. They made me feel important, something my father never did. I labeled a box of my old nursing textbooks, Phase 2, packed it that evening, and put it at the back of my closet. I went back to work early the following morning, not to get out, but to keep going. My father had a cardiac scare that same week. It was me that went in the ambulance with him. While he vomited in the emergency room, I held his hand. While the nurse was occupied, I changed his gown. When he was too feeble to lift a spoon, I gave him applesauce, and he never expressed gratitude. Not once. However, I was surprised by it. That's what separates me from them. I don't want to be noticed. I donate because I understand what it's like to be overlooked. He bounced back, slowly, and for picking such a handsome and successful fiancé, he raised a glass at the following family meal, not to me, but to Carissa. I simply grinned, silently. This was because the bank had just granted initial financing for Willow Haven. Additionally, my state licensing application was approved. I was in motion, out of their shadow, but not out of their house. I kept the loan a secret from everyone. I didn't owe anyone the truth, not Dean Carissa, or even my mother, who still believed that I put in extra hours because I felt guilty about not getting married. In any case, they had never been fond of it. I worked instead. Mornings bleed into nights. My uniform smelled like sadness and antiseptic. However, each weary breath felt intentional. None of them could take instruction from me. The engagement celebration followed. It took place at our family's country estate, a large space with white columns and antique family photos. The carpet was so thick that it could muffle even the loudest footsteps. Glistening in a blush gown, Carissa seemed to control the air as she moved across the space. In addition to pouring bourbon and clapping backs, Dean joked that her fiancé was fortunate to join a dynasty. I drank ginger ale while remaining near the patio's edge. I went unnoticed. Unless an aunt needed to be seated or a dish needed to be cleared, they hardly ever did. The toast followed. With a booming voice and watery eyes, my father lifted his glass. To Carissa, the family's light, the one who bestows upon us dignity, elegance, and beauty. Everyone gave a clap. With a half smile, he then casually added, "Not everyone can be a brilliant star. A few of us were simply destined to help the constellation." A few chuckled. "I guess we know who's who," said Dean, laughing as he nudged him. Once more, it was there. The dismissal was humorous. Someone disguised the taunt as a joke. I didn't wince. I simply excused myself and went inside and down the hall till I came to the vacant sitting room where there was still a slight ashy smell coming from the fireplace. As laughter reverberated through the walls like a language I had never mastered, I sat there looking into the chilly hearth. I wasn't upset. I was worn out. Fed up with acting as though their love might show up like a late bus one day. Weary of being the good sport, the dependable one, the family footnote. I was a prop, not a participant in the festivities. One of our patients, a gentle guy named Mr. Harlan, held my hand when I returned to the hospice later that evening. "You give someone a sense of realism," he muttered, as if we were still people. And I grinned while crying in ways I couldn't quite comprehend, because I had never felt more than that from my family. A few weeks went by. The residence was occupied by Carissa's wedding preparations. I moved more stealthily than before, taking care not to disrupt the bustle of floral samples, vendor calls, and dress fittings that filled the kitchen. Then my grandfather's attorney called one morning. He was dead, calmly as he slept. During those last 8 months, I had become his nurse. Not because I was asked. They had been so preoccupied with their own lives that they had seldom spoken about him. However, I had arrived. Each night, I assisted him in taking a bath. Read to him. When his memory failed him and his hands shook, he sat with him. His eyes softened when he spoke, which was not often. Naturally, the family attended the will reading in full splendor. Carissa is wearing pearls. Dean is wearing a jacket. With his shined shoes and somber demeanor, my father was in full Southern patriarch mode. I saw that my mother's eyeliner was fresh, even though she wore black. I was the last to arrive. I got no greetings. After adjusting his glasses, the lawyer started reading. There was an expectant silence in the room. A share of the company's stock was given to Dean. Dean gave Carissa a collection of antique jewelry and a sizable amount of money for her honeymoon. Due to the sale of an ancient piece of farmland, my parents received a small inheritance. The attorney then hesitated. He cleared his throat. Lena Caldwell will be the only beneficiary of the remaining estate, which includes the $1, $2 million parcel north of the family farm, and the entire Callahan Trust. Quiet. Then Carissa let out a piercing, uncontrollable laugh. "I apologize, but what?" The attorney went on. "Furthermore, This is not to be disputed in accordance with his scribbled command. Lena is to decide how to use the property and money, particularly to look for a care home for people without family. I remained motionless. I was not blinking. As though the chandelier had become heavier, the room swayed slightly. Dean's mouth froze. My father's face flushed with shock and incredulity. In addition, my mother muttered something that sounded like a nasty prayer. The attorney then whispered, "Lena was the only person who ever made me feel like a human being," your grandfather wrote. Then I looked up. Not in victory. However, in something far more substantial, something that stated, "You may see me now." I could hear the grandfather clock ticking behind the lawyer's chair since the room was so quiet. Carissa's mouth was slightly open, stuck halfway between indignation and incredulity, while her fingers gripped the armrest of her velvet seat. It appeared as though Dean wanted to say something, but was undecided about whether to laugh or yell. The leather creaked under my father's weight as he gently leaned back. He looked at me not quite with anger, but with a colder expression, as if I'd broken some unwritten rule. I remained silent. I just folded my hands in my lap, much like I used to do at work when a patient required more than just words to soothe them. "Is there a mistake here?" my mother asked in a weak, almost airy voice. The attorney gave a headshake. It was notarized, observed, and he was perfectly within his rights. Carissa turned to face me. Like ice, her voice broke. "Did you request this from him, Lena? How did you become his successor after spending a few nights reading him bedtime stories?" I still remained silent. I recalled all the evenings I spent holding my grandfather's trembling fingers. He occasionally forgot his own name, but could recall mine. "You remind me of your grandmother, not loud, but loyal," he once muttered. "They weren't with me in that house. They weren't." Carissa spat out, "This is disgusting." "A dying man was manipulated by you." The attorney cleared his throat once more. "A signed letter is part of the file. Do you want it read to you?" Nobody responded, so he did. "To my family," he said, his tone level, "I abandon what I think is just, centered on goodwill rather than ancestry or birth date." Lena appeared in the final months of my existence. Silently, without asking, without seeking recognition. When I was fading, she gave me a sense of being seen. I contribute to her because I'm grateful, not because I feel bad. And I hope that one day you will know what it is to be truly present, grandfather. Dean got to his feet, left without saying anything. Carissa sat back with her cheeks burning and her arms folded. And my dad? He remained still. He merely gazed at me, as if I were something he had never bothered to check before. Something new, something tangible. When I got home later that evening, my bedroom door was open. Inside, my mom was sitting on my bed with an album of pictures in her hand. One of the older ones before Carissa's first tiara before Dean left for college, when we all appeared to be a family, even if we weren't. "What kept you from telling us?" She turned a page and inquired softly. I propped myself up against the door. "Had you paid attention?" She didn't respond, and then, eventually, she got up and left the album behind. The days that followed were a haze. Carissa texted insulting things. When Dean attempted to hire an estate lawyer, the terms were too strict. I didn't hear from my father. Nothing. Not even when we happened to cross paths in the hallway, or while I prepared dinner more out of habit than obligation. But I continued. I had a meeting with architects, explored the area, imagined where the hospice garden would develop while strolling over untamed landscapes. I could already make out the courtyard bathed in sunlight, the gentle gray walls, and the peaceful apartments brimming with light laughter and books. I wasn't constructing a house to exact retribution. It was necessary, so I was building it. Nevertheless, the quiet at home felt more oppressive than before. My father requested me to assist him in fixing the screen door one evening around a week after the will reading. As simple as that. No small conversation. No, thank you, just a little guidance. He struggled with the frame as I held it firm, as we worked side by side, largely in quiet. After we were finished, he wiped his brow and added in a tone that bordered on harsh, "I had no idea he had such strong feelings for you." I stared at him for a while. There were others besides him. All I said was that. Then in silence, I returned inside. He remained on the porch gazing into the twilight as if the solutions were hidden there. My father ceased giving orders after that night. He didn't say much at first, but he also didn't yell or make fun of others. Like someone navigating a new area in a familiar house, he walked more slowly around me. My mother completely avoided making eye contact. And Carissa, well, she went all out. I could tell she was attempting to act as though the will hadn't affected her, because she started sharing photos of herself on social media, including clinking champagne, smiling in ballrooms, and hashtags like legacy and family pride. Her texts to me, however, revealed a different tale. "You believe that having land makes you a person, Lena? It's charity, not a crown." I didn't respond. I was too preoccupied with the task. I drove to the property every afternoon after work. The wind whispered softly through the leaves of a line of trees and acres of undulating grass. I would occasionally just stand there and breathe. You exist as if the ground itself were reminding me, you are important. The planning then started. Zoning, licenses, an ethical hospice care conference with the city. I brought my mission statement, my budget, and my illustrations. I gave them the blueprints for Willow Haven, a facility with treatment gardens, shared kitchens, private rooms, and a staff with training in both listening and medicine. After then, I received a letter. It was addressed to my workplace, not my home, and was postmarked on heavy ivory paper. Within, you are invited to attend the Caldwell Family Foundation annual banquet. I looked at it for a while. It was undoubtedly Dean's idea. Now serving as the chair of the Family Legacy Board, he worked to elevate the family name in the eyes of the public. I had never received an invitation before. I guess I made for nice optics, though, after the news release regarding the land transfer and after the will. I nearly tossed the mail, but I hesitated for a moment. Not to exact revenge, not for show. However, perhaps just possibly to complete a project that had begun ages ago. So I went. The Southern Heritage Club, with its marble columns and chandeliers, white-gloved waiters, and name tags written in gold letters, was the venue for the banquet. I wore a basic outfit. A little willow branch with a silver pin from one of my previous patients, a navy blue sheath with a high neck. I sensed it as soon as I came in. The change. People turned, not exactly with admiration, but in acknowledgement. Carissa stood in the middle of the room in a frost-glistening robe. Dean was laughing with donors while standing close to the stage. With impeccable posture and a courteous nod, my folks hovered close to the back. Then Dean noticed me. For a brief moment, his expression faltered. Then he got better. He stepped forward with a politician's smile and exclaimed, "Lena, we're very happy you could come. This is our sister, the future Willow Haven founder, everyone. Isn't that motivating?" Clapping was heard, courteous, short. Without a smile, I nodded. The speeches followed. Naturally, Dean went first. Discussed heritage growth and how the Caldwell name denoted giving. How the family supported new projects. Then, Carissa. She added in a gentle voice, "We've always believed in lifting each other up. And I'm happy to report that my sister is at last embracing her own identity." At last. That word was like a bone in my chest. Then they gave me a call. I was reluctant to talk. I didn't have anything ready. However, the room was observing, and I knew it was time the part of me that used to sob silently after family feasts. I took my time making my way to the podium. The microphone was adjusted, and whispered, "I'm grateful. Regarding the invitation, I'm known to some of you. Many of you don't. I'm not Caldwell's loudest person. I haven't been. However, when no one else did, our grandfather noticed me. When no one called, I took care of him. When his memory failed and he called for those who had stopped coming in a long time ago, I sat next to him. Furthermore, I didn't do anything for rewards. It was right, so I did it. I stopped. In his honor, I'm constructing Willow Haven for all those whose families have forgotten them. For each senior abandoned in quiet chambers. I guess I'm here tonight to convey that I don't require a round of applause. I simply wanted to let you know that I was always available, even when none of you paid attention." I retreated. The ensuing quiet wasn't uncomfortable. It was consciousness. I departed from the podium without lingering. I passed right by the white linen tables and the faces I had seen growing up, but had never really known the aunts who complimented Carissa's charm, but never inquired about my work and the cousins who had forgotten my birthday. No one yelled, but their eyes followed me. The night was still outside. In the woods, the cicadas hummed. I took a deep breath and allowed the cold to embrace my bare arms as I stood under the courtyard lantern's glow. Then I heard footsteps. My dad. He halted a little distance away, his jaw clenched as it had on the porch that day, and his tie relaxed. He remarked, "You made your sister feel ashamed." Not, "That was brave." Not, "You spoke well. That's all." I gave him a serious look. His shoulders, which had been proud, were a little hunched. His hair has become saltier than pepper. And he didn't have anger in his eyes. Not really. They didn't understand. As if he had no idea how to contain this version of myself. The one that stopped bowing. Quietly, I said, "I told the truth." He moved his weight, avoided looking at me. "You didn't need to bring up the past." "But none of you kept me anywhere else." He blinked. For the first time, I noticed a change in his expression, not remorse or shame, but realization. He said, almost to himself, "He picked you." "No," I answered. "He noticed me. That is not the same." I then turned to go. I stopped eating at home after the feast. I moved into a modest rental close to the property site. It was a 2-bedroom apartment with a kitchen that smelled like old pine and a shattered veranda. I enjoyed it. It made no apologies for being straightforward. It simply was similar to me. Willow Haven's construction got underway. The foreman and I took a morning stroll around the grounds. I chose a gentle sage green color for the hallways. I insisted on having windows in every room and selected cozy, movable lighting for the patient rooms. I said to the architect, "No one should have to live out their last days in the dark." Volunteers began to arrive, retired therapists, former nurses, and even some families that had lost a loved one to our hospice. They had faith in it. Not as a result of my Caldwell status. However, they had witnessed the consequences of forgetting individuals. Then a letter came in one afternoon. Simple envelope, no address for return. Within, "You've evolved." That's all in the handwriting of my father. No greeting was given. Don't apologize, but I spent a lot of time staring at those 2 words. Since they were mistaken, I was still the same person. I had just come out of hiding. There was a little ribbon-cutting ceremony on the day Willow Haven opened. Not a press, no cameras, only those who were important. Our initial residents came in one by one. Some are in wheelchairs, while others are smiling softly and moving slowly with canes. I shook their hands, introduced myself, and showed them to their rooms. Through the windows, sunlight poured in. Someone was tuning an ancient guitar in one of the entertainment rooms, and the sound of laughter reverberated down the hallway. A brass plaque had been affixed to the stone wall beside the entrance. It said, "In memory of those who were never seen." I sat on the back porch that night as twilight descended. The flowers had closed for the night and the garden was quiet. I took a drink of warm chamomile tea and listened to the quiet of tranquility. Then I noticed a car slowly enter via the gravel driveway. My father owned the truck. He took a tentative step outside while carrying something. He was carrying a folder and was dressed in an unpressed suit. He remained at the path's edge, not going any farther. I didn't get up. He nodded slightly. I looked at the swing on the porch next to me. Then he looked down again at the folder he was holding. "I am aware that I am not welcome," he stated. "However, I read about what you constructed, and I wondered perhaps." He walked away. I murmured softly, "We're full." He raised his head. He didn't completely lose his expression, but he gripped the folder tighter. I said, "We do have a wait list, if you want to join it." A long silence. Then he came forward and gave it to me carefully, almost respectfully. "Write down my name." He walked back to his pickup after turning. I did not see him go. I simply sat there with the folder on my lap and the tea cooling in my fingers. Additionally, I've never in my life. I was light. Until the sky turned from gold to a gentle velvet blue, I remained on the porch. As if even paper could harbor tension, the folder sat unopened next to me, its corners slightly crinkled. I refrained from opening it. I didn't have to. I already knew that it had nothing to do with admissions papers or medical records. Something more subdued, perhaps a sign of surrender, or the only apologies he could muster. Warm light filled the hallways of the mansion. I could hear a wobbly yet lovely antique piano tune coming from the common room. There was someone humming. There was soft, frail laughter. Life had returned to Willow Haven. Human life, gentle and real. Additionally, I didn't want to turn around. A week later, Carissa's wedding dress fitting updates filled the family group chat. Even though I had turned off those alerts months before, I still checked them from time to time, like looking through a window of a house I no longer occupied. "She's going with blush instead of white so bold. Her fiancé's family is flying in from Boston. It'll be a full house. Dean, can you handle seating for the rehearsal dinner?" I was not mentioned at all, not even politely asking, "Are you coming?" However, I was unharmed. No more. The wedding day arrived and passed. Doris, a resident who used to sew wedding dresses in New Orleans, and I spent the day strolling down the garden path. She told me about brides crying when they first see themselves in the mirror, about veils and about lace. She squeezed my arm and whispered, "I used to cry too. But not for happiness." She leaned against me that night as we watched the stars come into view and said, "I can no longer recall their names. My kids. They ceased making calls. However, I feel like someone still does when we are here together." I also took her hand, because I've discovered that love is not dependent on a person's ancestry. Carissa shared pictures from her wedding on social media. Hashtags such as Southern Royalty, Family First, and Caldwell Elegance. At the reception, Dean spoke. My father was present, his face frozen in a rigid smile. My mother, dressed in blue, took a seat close to the front beside a seat that had belonged to me. I watched the video to study, not to feel envious. How meticulously they could act. People's attempts to block out what's lacking may be so loud. Carissa looked radiant in all the pictures. Dean smiled. "However, my dad, His eyes were dull. Weeks went by. Willow Haven gradually filled up. Every newcomer contributed a unique energy and rhythm. One enjoyed jazz. When her arthritis permitted, she made another cornbread. The nurse staff started referring to the sunroom as the battlefield after someone launched a chess club. Then one morning, a nurse came in with a query while I was sorting mail in the main office. "Someone is inquiring about visitation, Lena. There is space for one." I raised my head. "Who?" She paused. "Your dad." My lungs didn't expel air quickly. It was slow to arrive. It simply paused. I answered, "He's not on the list. He didn't request a bed. It's just time." I took my time moving down the hallway. The row of rooms with their names carefully scribbled in calligraphy on each door, the soft carpeted hall beyond the lawn. I discovered him standing next to the memory wall which houses the inhabitants' childhood black and white photos, grinning alive. Their edges were softer before time. He appeared older than I had recalled. It was his posture, not his face, as if something had fallen apart inside of him. He didn't say anything at first when he turned. At last, he stated, "I expected to feel upset after seeing everything. However, I'm not. I feel proud." I had never heard him say that word before connected to my name. This is what I intended to construct. I assumed it must have been legacy all those years. Structures. Enterprise. However, I can now see its existence. I let our stillness fill the room. He continued by saying, "You accomplished something that none of us could. You left us even though you loved us." His eyes filled with tears. Not a deluge. There was only one running down his cheek. "I apologize," he muttered. I gave one nod. Not a drama. No major emotional high point. "Take a minute. It's true. Keep quiet. Enough." After that, I gave him a brochure as I took him outside past the wind chimes that tinkled in the garden breeze. I softly said, "For the wait list. In case you ever require it." He gave a feeble smile and departed without saying anything more. However, I saw him leave this time. The days following his visit went relatively quietly. Like an ancient lullaby, Willow Haven found its beat. Mornings began with the soft clatter of dishes in the kitchen and sunlight streaming in through the east windows. At midday, there were storytelling circles, puzzles, and gardening. Grief doesn't follow a timetable, so there were difficult days, but there was also serenity. Here, people didn't need to act like everything was fine. They simply have to be authentic. Our oldest resident, Mrs. Ellery, was sitting by the window with a small radio in her lap one day as I was passing the central corridor. She was watching the breeze rustle the leaves while singing a song from the 1950s. I inquired if she desired companionship. "Only if you don't say anything." She smiled, so I took a seat. We also heard the wind. My grandfather had appreciated that kind of presence. Not a sound, not paying attention, but a hand close by. They exchanged a breath. A silence that was more powerful than cheers. A fresh envelope showed up at the front desk one day. Light blue, delicate penmanship. Carissa. I nearly forgot to open it. However, I did. "I guess I ought to congratulate you. Now it looks like everyone in town believes you are a saint. Like it's a miracle they keep bringing up Willow Haven. I'm not sure if you'll care or even read this. To be fair, though, I had no idea. I didn't see you. I don't believe I desired to. I was too busy shining. In any case, I am anticipating. March is the due date. Perhaps one day she'll realize what a sister ought to be. And perhaps I'll recall how one feels. Carissa." Silently, I folded the letter and put it in my drawer. It's for preservation, not resentment. Some wounds stop bleeding even when they don't completely shut. And for the time being, that was sufficient. We had a small party on the first anniversary of Willow Haven's opening. Only a few families, workers, and residents. There were no elegant meals or speeches. Just a long wooden table with candles in antique jam jars and mismatched chairs among the willow trees. Doris brought cobbler with peaches. A guitar was strung by one of the nurses. On a chalkboard, someone had written, "Thank you, Lena," but the wind kept blurring the letters. No toast was made by me. I chose to sit next to Mr. Finch, who still fixed broken clocks in his room after working as a watchmaker. He gave me a little brown paper-wrapped present. "From us all," he uttered. "It's not a big deal." There was a small, hand-carved plaque within, a swing with delicate details carved on it. Suspended from a tree, below it, "Remaining here." Before I could stop it, a lump began to rise in my throat. Because, well, yes, I was. Not because they noticed me. However, I never really abandoned myself. I got myself a cup of tea and strolled through the silent hallways that evening after the tables had been cleared and the candles had gone out. The light was warm in every room. Every door has an actual name, not merely a patient, an individual. I stopped by the chapel's east-facing window. The breeze rustled the tall grasses while the garden sat motionless outside under the stars. In the breeze, a lone porch swing swayed softly. It's the same one I sat on when he brought the folder that evening. I hadn't touched that one since. I went outside barefoot and headed for it. The familiar and forgiving wood creaked beneath me. I put my hands around the ropes and allowed it to wobble slightly in the wind. The sky was open and wide above me. I didn't require their praise. I was no longer in need of their affection. Since I had improved something, a resting place for the forgotten, a life in which I didn't wait to be seen, a serenity that I had created myself. As the darkness became darker, the door behind me softly clicked shut. And for the first time in my entire life, I felt complete.